Welcome to The Explainer, where we dig into the documents and the data to find out what really happened. Today, we're pulling the legal files on the most infamous betrayal in wrestling history.
For years, we all thought we knew the answer. It was a story everyone in wrestling knew by heart, a backstabbing that went down live on pay-per-view, in front of millions of people.
Yeah, that one. The story of a champion double-crossed by his boss. But what if I told you the evidence shows that's not the whole story, not even close? To really get to the truth, you have to follow the paper trail.
Okay, so first up, the unprecedented 20-year contract. This whole thing was about loyalty over cash. And to understand the crime, you've got to understand the evidence. It all kicks off with this totally unique contract, signed in 1996, right in the middle of a corporate war.
So check this out. Bret Hart, who's the biggest star in the business, has a choice to make. On one hand, the competition, WCW, is offering him a mountain of cash. We're talking $3 million a year. But the WWF, they offer him a future, a 20-year deal, a path from the ring to the boardroom. He took less money up front for that long-term security, and for one very, very important clause.
And this was the clause, reasonable creative control. This is pretty much the legal key to this whole mess. It meant that for his last few weeks with the company, Bret had the power to veto how his story ended as long as he gave them another option that still made business sense. You're going to want to lock that word reasonable away in your head. It becomes everything later on.
All right, part two, a company in financial peril. This is where we find the motive. You think everything was all set, right? Lifetime deal, creative control, but just 1 year later, the world had completely changed. The WTIF was in deep, deep trouble. And that beautiful contract, well, it was starting to look like an anchor.
And I mean, just look at this number. This isn't some rumor. This is straight from their own public SEC filings. A net loss of $6.5 million in 1997. They were getting crushed in the ratings, and they were just hemorrhaging cash. The company was fighting for its life. So what went wrong? Well, it was a perfect storm, really. Fewer people were coming to the shows, ad money was flat, and they had this massive payroll loaded with guaranteed deals. All of a sudden, that 20-year contract that was supposed to be about loyalty, from a financial point of view, it had become a toxic asset.
So now we get to the betrayal before the betrayal. And this is so important because the contract was actually broken in September, not November. All that financial pressure forced Vince McMahon's hand, and what he did in September 1997, that was the first breach of contract. The famous Screwjob was actually betrayal number 2.
Now, here's a little legalese for you. The term is anticipatory reputation. It sounds fancy, but it's super simple. It's when someone tells you, hey, that promise I made you, I'm not going to keep it. And they tell you this before they're even supposed to do it. In the eyes of the law, it's a total and complete breach of the deal. And the breach, it came down to 4 little words. In September 1997, Vince McMahon sits Bret Hart down and tells him, point blank, I can't pay you. Boom. Right there, with that sentence, he was rejecting the financial terms of that 20-year deal.
So this is the crucial moment. In that instant, the contract was legally dead, void. And it wasn't Bret who broke it, it was the WWF. That meant Bret was immediately a free agent. He didn't know them a thing. And get this, the craziest part? It was Vince McMahon himself who then told him, you should probably call the competition and get a new job.
So let's just lay this out so it's crystal clear. September 22nd, McMahon says he can't pay, breaching the contract. November 1st, Bret does exactly what he was told and signs a huge new deal with WCW. That leaves us with November 9th, the big show in Montreal. Bret is still the champion, and that reasonable creative control clause, it is officially in effect.
And this set up a whole new fight. It wasn't about money anymore, now it was about control. McMahon demanded that Bret lose the title to his biggest real-life rival, Shawn Michaels, in his own home country of Canada. Bret said absolutely not, and he exercised that veto power in his contract. So the big legal question becomes, was his refusal reasonable?
Well, the evidence here is just overwhelming. He didn't just say no. He gave them options. Lots of them. He said he'd lose to anyone else. He offered to lose to Shawn Michaels anywhere else in the US. He even offered to just show up the next night, hand them the belts, and say goodbye. He was fulfilling his end of the bargain. He was being reasonable.
But Vince McMahon rejected every single offer. Instead, he went behind Bret's back, he conspired with the referee, with Bret's opponent, and they cooked up a secret ending to the match without Bret's knowledge. They humiliated him on live television to force the title off him. And that was the second and much more famous breach of contract.
So let's get to the verdict and the legacy, why the guilty party walked away the winner and the victim couldn't do a thing about it legally. I mean, let's recap. We have two clear breaches of contract by the WWF, which brings up a really obvious question.
If Bret Hart had them dead to rights, why didn't he take them to court? The company had broken its word twice. The answer is actually pretty fascinating, and it all comes down to a simple but powerful legal idea every lawyer knows.
It's called mitigation of damages. All it really means is that the law says if someone breaks a contract with you, you can't just sit back and watch the damages pile up. You have a duty to try and limit your losses. If you lose a job, you have to at least try to find a new one.
And this right here is exactly why a lawsuit was impossible. By taking McMahon's advice and signing with WCW, Bret didn't just mitigate his damages, he almost doubled his salary. Any court in the country would look at that and say, what financial damages are you even suing for? The irony is, the breach actually ended up making him more money.
But that's not where the story ends. Oh no. Because this absolutely ruthless business decision, this double breach of contract, had a massive, completely unintended consequence that would change the entire wrestling industry forever. See, to explain his actions, Vince McMahon had to go on TV and basically embrace being the bad guy. This gave birth to the evil Mr. McMahon character. And that character's rivalry with the rebel employee Stone Cold Steve Austin became the single most profitable storyline in wrestling history. It literally saved the company. So think about the ultimate irony. By breaking a contract to save $1.5 million, McMahon accidentally created the on-screen villain that made him a real-life billionaire.
Look, there's no way around it. It was a clear breach of contract, it was a personal betrayal, legally and ethically it was wrong. But from a purely business perspective, it saved his company and turned it into a global powerhouse. So we're left with a final, kind of provocative question. Was breaking this contract the best business decision Vince McMahon ever made?